Man, it's been a terrible week, but let's hit it off with some good news. So, Kasey dropped something I didn't see coming, or, well, Starseed Games, which is a joint team of Kasey and Jason Vanderslice. This is Hymn to the Earless God, or rather, the demo of Hymn to the Earless God. If you're wondering why the title is such a mouthful, this is from the developer of Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass, so I guess the titles go down by a couple syllables every project. The game's a turn-based RPG in a grimdark, bug-centric setting by the name of Gloom. The concept is that you play 4 different characters with 4 different stories and calamities that they supposedly will be in charge of preventing. The setting has an appropriate name considering the game boasts that it will have many potential allies of varying loyalty, a cutthroat atmosphere, and a system where you will be devouring fallen enemies for nourishment just to prevent their allies from doing the same. I am definitely biased because I thought Jimmy was a very good game, but when Kasey boasts it will heavily reward exploration and has game-changing gear that will make characters shine in new ways, I believe it full-heartedly because that's exactly how Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass was designed. One mechanic I definitely find interesting is that it suggests that the decisions that you make in a previous campaign can have rippling effects in the alternate ones, meaning that there will be more cause and effect for each calamity, and all these consequences are all on the same save, having the adventure locked off while complete. Not entirely sure how it works yet. Kasey says it's intended to be a one-and-done type thing, but honestly with a wide array of mercenaries and this mechanic, assuming it were implemented, would encourage replaying the campaigns not only for potential different decisions, but in different orders to see the results of those consequences. The gameplay is pretty solid, although basic, but that's to be expected for a demo of an RPG. I'm certain there'll be more room for the players to really experiment with what the game has to provide once the game branches out past the opening areas. The game follows a turn order based on the agility of all the characters, and this is one of those games where if you have a high enough agility compared to your opponents, or attack them first in the overworld, you get a bonus turn, although the bonus turn does have limitations. There's also strategization around character placement before battles as front row characters are targeted by melee enemies, which seems to be the most common opponent, although the placement system really isn't explored as one campaign is a single party member, and the other already has an optimal placement, and there's really no need to fiddle with it outside of this. Potions heal, but can also be spiked with other ingredients to grant additional effects. One thing I really like here, primarily in the first story's demo, you deal with a lot of bleed and poison, and this game has a way of making the two distinctly different, which I feel some RPGs fail at. Bleed is the damage over time that decreases over turns as a form of duration, and poison works as a flat damage amp. Each stack is an extra point of damage on top of attacks on the one afflicted, and they also seem to bypass the damage reduction of blocking. It seems that both are viable options for dealing with tankier enemies, but Bleed serves as a passive option, while Poison encourages an aggressive route. Earlier I mentioned devouring. Enemies that you defeat can be devoured in combat. They can also be devoured out of combat, but the feeding will prioritize party members with higher agility, and there's multiple benefits that this provides. The most obvious being a small amount of health. There are 2 meters, health and nourishment. When health is full, devouring provides nourishment. When both are full, the character becomes satiated, which leads to a temporary boost in stats, but also means that they cannot eat any more bodies for the time being. This system encourages you to be selective on your target's priority order, and even potentially how quickly you kill them. You may weigh in your mind whether or not this specific enemy is willing to devour their allies, and that they'll steal your bounty on the next turn now that you spent yours killing their ally. Remember, they can heal too, and they seem to become satiated on the first body they eat. Any poison left on an opponent also lingers in their body, which can serve as an effective deterrent for the enemy who devours it, but also means that you will want to wait out a poison timer before defeating an enemy so that you can safely devour them. You can't really work with a ton of these mechanics yet, but you can very easily see where the blueprints of the gameplay and strategy is going to go. In the demo, 2 of the characters are playable for a brief segment of the first chapter, the first being Pox the Vile, and the second being Capella. Although admittedly neither would have been my first choice, I think these 2 were the best of the 4 to pick because when you read each of the brief descriptions, Pox and Capella are polar opposites to the point that I think it really does well to establish the varying tones of the setting, which I appreciate because I kind of worried it was just going to be all grimdark all the time. I mean, the place is ran by insects, is called Gloom, and has multiple world-ending crises at any given point, but that doesn't mean it shies from these ideas. An obvious example being Puck's life as a slave serving a termite kingdom called the Vericord, which live in a tree they tore apart and made into a fortress. Pox is not your average Varric, he's below average, and it's no surprise to anyone he can't carry his weight of work and eventually collapses, only to immediately be torn apart by other slaves who find his body, now missing an arm and an eye. I'm setting a rule for myself right now that I only get 1 berserk joke per video I make of this game. Pox fights off 2 slaves through grim determination, and here we already see the tone as the first slave Pox kills will immediately be devoured by the other. Pox collapses again after his bloodlust, only to be taken to the queen and berated for his weakness. And when Pox responds that all Varric start lowly, the queen says that all Varric begin as lowly slaves, burrowing to survive and make something of themselves, and even she began there, but she was never as truly pathetic as Pox, before throwing him into a pit. Once reaching the bottom, Pox has to claw and stab his way through hordes of foes to survive, devouring the weak and adorning himself in rags of what he can find in this bleak hellscape. Pox fights alone as he escapes and has the opportunity to devour anyone who isn't immediately hostile, including someone who is friendly but too weak to be of use, and the tutorial guide. I declined because I love tutorial characters. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Clemens.
Last one you came upon me sunk a bullet just above my good eye.
Pox has earned his freedom for all intents and purposes. He was banished out, is seen as a weakling, and won't be pursued. He could become a mercenary and live out on his own despite the reputation of the Varric. But Pox wants to return, to prove his strength and to overthrow the queen in an act of spite, likely to try to lead about his own calamity. Which is ironic since, if the trailer is to be believed, he seems destined to prevent one. Now compare that to Capella, who is so god-blessed special that I expect some players to even find it obnoxious. She's the last of a bygone race, practices one of the most rare forms of magic in the setting, revered by those who raised her, and protected by a pair of personal bodyguard priests while going on her pilgrimage to meet God. Or was it give birth to God? The details are a bit muddy, but she has a sacred destiny she must fulfill, and I'm certain that it won't end up being something far more sinister with how vague it is. The first striking detail to me is that Pox has to fight to get to the character that serves as a guide, and then at any point, Pox can kill and devour the only person in the area that provides valuable info. Capella only has one potential encounter before reaching her reservoir of information in the demo, and it's easily avoided, and if you do run into it, it's a breeze. The guide is a floating book that you can always come back to, likely placed there by those who set you on this journey to ensure the safest of travels. It is night and day between the two. In my multiple times completing both demos, I've died plenty of times as Pox, but I've not gotten a single game over as Capella, who not only has allies which are healthy and fed, but magic, equipment, and even a potion as well as a lot of free consumables lying around. It's also apparent of Capella's relatively sheltered nature by her traits. She's a vegetarian in a world that you constantly devour your fallen. When finding a rare consumable, she rejects it openly and only allows one of the other party members to take it. She is built to play as a support initially, and only strays on her path to God when hearing somebody deeper in the woods calling for help, asserting that everyone has the potential to be a part of God's family. But what makes Capella not fall into the trap of being a Mary Sue is that you can already see the cracks in her pampered lifestyle. Capella has a very naive nature about her, and uses the weight of her title over her bodyguards constantly to deviate from their objective. When she finds the creature that calls out for help and the bodyguards explain this is the natural order and the victim is part of the food chain of these creatures, Capella immediately shoots down the rather consistent logic that the allies bring up that killing this creature to save the stranger is killing a potential child of God, and is endangering the pilgrimage, risking her own life. She interjects by saying this beast can't be one of God's creations and must be stopped. Capella doesn't want to admit that she doesn't have any good argument for impeding the circle of life the way she is under the creed of her religion. She could have argued she values the victim here more because it's a conscious being, thus can learn from the word of God, but Capella not thinking of that works in the story's favor as it shows that she's not used to being challenged in matters like these. She's used to serving the will of her God, and anyone below her in the hierarchy must listen to her as she's the chosen one and all that. Meanwhile with Pox, the first creature after you get thrown in the pit that you meet isn't initially hostile, but he is weak and in an injured state, and fighting to then devour him provides you a serious edge in the upcoming fight which there is no way to sneak around. If you do not devour this one, you have to be very careful with exactly how you battle this, or else you'll be depending on grit to kick in to save your life. Everything about this environment screams survival of the fittest in that you're only the king of the discarded wretches. Not only does he have to be careful in what order he kills enemies, what bodies he consumes, which order you kill them in if you have the chance, as the starving ones will desperately tear apart clean allies, but the one able-bodied enemy here will mop the floor with you if you try to approach them. Even if you have all the nutrition, levels, and equipment you could scrounge in this area, if you forget your place, the game will gladly remind you. I think the demo does an excellent job establishing some of the tones it attends in the areas that are currently available through the narrative of game mechanics, and I hope to one day see the full product come to life. As of the time this is being uploaded, the game is on Kickstarter, and I backed it as I do trust Kasey to make a well-designed game, and with the funding I think he and Jason will have this project fully realized. If you're interested and happen to watch this at the time the Kickstarter is still running, there's a link in the description for said Kickstarter so you can check it out for yourself. and even if you can't donate, the demo is available on Steam and itch.io, so you can give it a try yourself. Though you can only play the beginning segment like Pox and Capella, with Capella's intro not completed yet. But I wanted to show this game off to anyone who might not know about it because I think it's pretty cool, and I'd like more people to know about it. But that's all I've got to say for this video, so I hope you all have a good day and be safe.